some. Let me check the other. And Carolyn, has always said, you need the discipline of preaching on the gospel. So here goes. First, I want to start by kind of reiterating or paraphrasing what I believe I heard when I read the gospel. Jesus has got this big crowd of people following him, and he turns to them and says, hate your family. Hate your mothers and your fathers and your sisters and your brothers and your grandchildren. Hate yourself. Be willing to die a slow and painful death. It's going to cost you. Are you ready to surrender? Because this is war. And the enemy has twice as many troops as you do. Give up all your possessions. Kind of fits the crowd. And my objections started rising, I would say, as fast as a storm on Superior. This sounds like some snotty teenager with attitude saying, I hate you, Mom. I hate my life. Just let me die. Willfulness and lack of vision. What about love your neighbor as yourself? What about come unto me, all you that travail and heavy laden, and I will give you rest? What about they will know you are disciples by how you love one another? What's all this talk about hate? How can this be? I'm going to leave the question hanging, actually. And I'm going to talk about the next section, which is building towers. Now, I am tempted, but I'm not going to make any comments on any particular individuals who have built towers. But have any of you been involved in major building projects? Yeah. Okay. So, how many of your projects have come in on time and under budget? None of mine have. Okay. So, but I know a little bit about building and how to estimate costs, and if I don't know the cost of lumber, I can call Howard, and I'm sure he'll give me a reasonable quote. Or I can call and find out the cost of wallboard, and I can add all of those things up. So how come it never kind of turns out right? And if it doesn't turn out right in the material world, how am I going to ever figure out the cost of discipleship? Wait, cost of discipleship. That's a book. I could go to the book and learn about this. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, as you may know, wrote a book called The Cost of Discipleship. And if you don't remember, Dietrich Bonhoeffer was a theologian, Lutheran, who was martyred for his resistance to the Nazis shortly before the liberation. So he has a lot to say about the cost of discipleship. Obviously, it cost him dearly. The first portion of the book is actually about grace, and that there is no cheap grace. We can't just say the name of Jesus and everything is forgiven and we go on with our lives the way it was before. Grace is costly. We have to change. We have to pay attention. And he also, in the chapter, talks about this very gospel with hating your family and hating everything except Christ. So what's the cost of discipleship from Bonhoeffer's perspective? Well, I think it's a little bit like that old joke about, the new tax code. How much did you make last year? Send it in. The cost of discipleship is everything. Well, sitting with all this guilt and shame and cost and sin is very un-Anglican. Makes me wonder, am I a Christian? I mean, I love my family. I love this place. I love my profession, and I love my things. One of the other things that Bonhoeffer talks about, though, is Christ as the mediator. Now, I always tended to think of the mediator, I think I was introduced to this concept more by sort of my evangelical friends, and the idea is that Christ somehow stands between me and my angry God. But Bonhoeffer talks about, and you'll pardon the sexist language here, standing between man and man. God is mediator between individuals and the humanity and the world. He writes, the call of Jesus teaches us that our relation to the world has been built on an illusion. All the time we had thought that we enjoyed a direct relation with men and things. This is what has hindered us from faith and obedience. There is no way from one person to another. However loving and sympathetic we may try to be, however sound our psychology, however frank and open our behavior, we cannot penetrate the incognito of the other man, for there is no direct relationship, not even between soul and soul. Christ stands between us, and we can only get into touch with our neighbors through him. Christ, then, is the mediator, like a filter, if you will, for how we see the world. And we know that we all see the world through our own filters. To quote the other great theologian, Paul Simon, a man hears what he wants to hear and disregards the rest. We are called to follow him. This is not our idea. It's not our initiation. It is a response. It's about attitude. And I don't mean attitude like a sunny disposition or the glass is half full or certainly not the sort of Pollyanna view of the world. I mean attitude more in the sense that a pilot would use it or a space traveler. What is our position and our direction relative to some fixed external reference point, in this case, Jesus? Back to what Jesus meant by hatred. I don't think we're talking about emotion here. This is not a feeling, but it's an attitude. It's not the teenage self-absorption and lack of vision. Nothing comes between us and God. Indeed, it is the other way around. God comes between us and everything. I happen to love my family, even if I'm someone who believes that they're I love my life in this junction of wilderness and community, where I can be alone and silent, where I can be in community with others. I rejoice in my material wealth and understanding that that I am but a steward. If I do this, it is because in my best moments, I see the face of God in my family, in each of you, and in the opportunity it provides to be of service. So how do we orient ourselves? What turns our heads? When I was looking at that analogy, it reminded me of Bonnie, our beagle. And she may or may not turn her head when I call her name. She almost certainly will if there's food involved. But she also seems to have sort of a deeper, insistent obsession, and she will follow her nose regardless if she's on the scent, even if she's offered food. Perhaps this is the level at which we are to follow Jesus. Intense, passionate, absorbed, on the scent. Bonhoeffer again. The way is unutterably hard, and at every moment we are in danger of straying from it. If we regard this way as one we follow in obedience to an external command, we are afraid of ourselves all the time. It is indeed an impossible way. But if we behold Jesus Christ going before, step by step, we will not go astray. My attitude needs to be not to follow external things or relationships, but God alone. When Jesus calls, I need to be ready to turn my head, to realign and reorient. For there frequently are times when I mistakenly believe my relationships with people and things alone is direct. Yes, Jesus did mean it. We cannot argue ourselves out of a relationship with him. It is our only relationship. Discipleship costs us everything and nothing. We cannot force it. Indeed, we do not do it at all. We only hear God and see God